Great, thanks very much, Dave. Just making sure that you can hear me properly. Great. So it's a privilege. I just want to do, sorry, before I go, yeah, we got a good sound check there. Great, thank you. It's a privilege to be part of the Landscapes in Motion project, and I just want to acknowledge the many people who have made this work possible, as well as the territories, the traditional territories on which we do our work, the Mountain Legacy Project. So we work all over the Mountain West, British Columbia, Alberta, and the Yukon, and the image collections on which our efforts are based were taken mostly during the early settlement period across the whole region, and the legacies of the early mountain surveys left behind a colonial imprint. So our work is dedicated in many ways now to reinterpreting these images and contributing to reconciliation and a deeper understanding of these remarkable landscapes. And I want to thank all of you for being here and taking such an interest in this project and such a keen focus on the challenges of managing these complicated places. And I just have to throw out thanks as well to the amazing group of researchers, students, volunteers, mountain and photography loving contributors, archival specialists, provincial government land managers, and field crews who have made the work of the Mountain Legacy Project possible. We benefit enormously from all this generosity, so thank you. Now, I want to make sure that we're not too confused about the name of things. So yeah, Mary, if you don't mind switching to the next slide, thanks. We are known as the Visual Applications Team, and we also are called the Oblique Photo Project, so whatever works. So this is just a shout out slide to all the different institutional partners as well who have supported our work, including FRI Research and Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. Thanks, Mary. Next slide. And just so you know, Mary is controlling things, and I'm going to turn it over to her in a few minutes, but I've got the first number of slides, so I'm going to be asking her to control it. So we're going to do 4 things today. We're first going to introduce the Mountain Legacy Project overall. Second, the role that we have in the Landscapes in Motion project. Third, we're going to peer in at some of the software that we're using to unlock secrets of these image collections. And then finally, we're going to look at some of the application with Landscapes in Motion data. Next slide, please. So the Mountain Legacy Project is really anchored fundamentally by archival information. So we're fortunate that the early land surveyors and geological surveyors across Western Canada took photographs when they were creating early topographic maps. And they left behind glass plate photographic negatives, tens of thousands of them, which sat mostly unattended in the National Archives and in the BC Provincial Archives for decades. And we've been fortunate to come across them and start using them in our research. But this is just to say that, you know, this iceberg metaphor is perhaps helpful here, is that underneath the images that you'll see is a vast amount of archival effort, as well as a lot of digital management effort to deal with the now 7 terabytes of image data that we've amassed as part of the project, and trying to serve that out to make sure that anyone and everyone can use it. Thanks. Next slide, please. Mary, are you able to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
Sorry. So the most charismatic part of our work, so I just passed over what may be the least charismatic part of our work, but the most charismatic part of our work is our field efforts. And you can see the nature of the transitions. Mary, do you mind going back and doing that transition again for me, please? So this is the Athabasca Glacier as it looked in the early 20th century, and the changes are powerful and evident. And this is emblematic of the kinds of transitions that we're seeing throughout the Canadian mountains. And we have, our work is based, next slide please, Mary. Our work is based on the remarkable exploits of the surveyors that I mentioned. These were historic land surveyors whose job was to create topographic maps in the highly topographic area of the Mountain West. I mean, it was, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it was relatively straightforward to create maps of the prairies. But when you hit the mountains, it got a whole lot more complicated. And so we developed a made in Canada technology for creating these maps using photography. And we saw an opportunity starting in the late 1990s, working in Jasper National Park and other places, to go back and repeat those photographs from exactly the same location. And these field photographs, Mary, you can move through them if you don't mind, come from this area. This is the Bull Creek looking into the Highwood. And then the next slide, please. Yeah, Chester Call, right in the heart of the Kananaskis country. See our field crews. And next one, please. It's fading slowly. There we are, but you might recognize this person as Mary Sanseverino, standing in Willoughby Ridge in the Lost Creek fire area. And then next slide, please. Mary, I'm getting a long delay in the transitions on the slides. I'm not sure if that's a, oh, there we are. Great, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. Yeah, now, obscure fact, sorry. Can you go back? Just one more. Just to the one with the person in the bright yellow jacket.
Yeah, so it's just taking a little while.
Oh, all right, okay. No, that's no worries. So just obscure fact, but the person in the bright yellow jacket here on McDougall Ridge, looking back towards Barrier Lake, is Rick Arthur, who for many years worked with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. And then the next slide is a really distinct blast from the past. So that's a younger me looking at Crow's Nest Mountain. Apparently I had hair back then. And on the right slide, though, the man standing in the foreground is Bruce Mayer with Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, who was out with us in 2006. So that goes back a few years. All right, let's turn to the next slide, please.
It's taking its time to come up, so.
No, it's good, thank you. Okay. So we've been doing the next component of our work looks at research and applications. So what can we use these photographs for? And Mary, just go through the fades as you can, and I will speak to them. So we've been looking at being able to segment and classify these images, render virtual photographs, and develop custom software for analyzing and visualizing these photographs. And you're going to see more of this in detail later, so I'm skipping over it pretty quickly. Next slide, please. Oh. And we do our best to report out on a lot of the work that we do, including a variety of research findings. We've been focused also on networking and communications. So we maintain an active website, including the Explorer application, which provides access to all of the roughly 9,000 image pairs that we have up available. We have an active blog site, which is quite a large subscription. We've been an integral part of the Landscapes in Motion program, We see our work featured in different online sites like Lens Culture and in magazines like Discover magazine. So we try to keep active in terms of communicating out because these photographs are pretty charismatic. But I want to summarize the distinctiveness, though, of these collections because it is something that we have that is precious in Canada. They're comprehensive, so they cover most of the mountain regions in Canada. They're systematic. We think about 120,000 images. We don't quite know. They're large format glass plates, so they're high resolution, really impressive for the time. And they also offer significant time depth, so well before the advent of aerial imagery and remote sensing. So we have some images from Banff National Park as early as 1888. Next slide, please. So with our Landscapes in Motion project, we took originally three main objectives. So we wanted to look at the issue of how we can take oblique images, which are images from, say, the top of a mountain looking down across a landscape, which has, trust me on this, complicated geometry to sort out. Could we rectify those images so they would play nicely with geographic information systems? The second, we wanted to produce a suite of visualization tools, so software tools for working with these images. And third, we wanted to provide support for research, management, and decision-making. Next slide, please. And before I turn things over to Mary, I just wanted to say that we don't want to go into great depth, but there's active research going on around the world right now, searching for digital tools that unlock these kinds of images. So many of you will know Chris Stockdale with the Canadian Forestry Service, who has been working extensively with a tool out of Switzerland called monoplotting, and which offers some really significant advantages and interesting features, but also some limitations. And so we've been searching for other ways of being able to rectify the images that we work with and be able to apply them more generally across the landscape. So you're going to hear about that today. Mary, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eric. So I'd like to explore with you folks today the burning question, no pun intended, that's informed much of the work that I do with the Mountain Legacy Project. And the question is this: what kind of visualization tools can we build that will help researchers, scientists, managers, indeed anyone interested in mountain landscapes explore, interpret, and discover meaning in images like these? And this is Mount Assiniboine just across the line here in British Columbia. And with the help of collaborations like Landscape in Motion, like FRI, and like Alberta Agriculture and Forestry, we've developed a software workflow embodied in our image analysis toolkit. And it's this toolkit that I'm going to present here for the next few minutes. So the image that we just looked at, and the fades, and we have fades and we have sweeps in our image analysis toolkit, and windows and zooming and all of that sort of regular stuff. The other thing we can do is we can do classifications here. And so we've put a land classification on the two images that you saw, the image taken by Arthur Wheeler in 1913 and the MLP image in 2017. And so there we see the classes, but let's look a little tiny bit closer. So this image is the 1913 classified, and it shows a fairly heterogeneous landscape, lots of different components in the landscape in the classifications that we've put on it. And the data that you see in the top left-hand corner of the screen, that comes out of the image analysis toolkit, basic stats on percentage cover in the image of the various classes. And here's the here's the 2017 shot that is in the same area. And I'd like to focus on the dense conifer, because that's the thing that really stood out for me. One of the things that we can visualize, and this is again in IAT, one of the things we can do is we can do a union of a given classification in a visualization. So here, if it was dense conifer in 1913 or dense conifer in 2017, then it's on this image. And you can see that this is common. This sort of mid-color green was in both 1913 and 2017. This dark green just in 2017. And this little patch over here, dense conifer only in 1913. Interestingly, this is very close to where the campground in this area is. But this is the big aha moment, or it certainly was for me when I looked at this. Here, what we're doing is we're saying, well, okay, if it was dense conifer in 2017, what was it back in 1913? And so yes, 11% of the category is unchanged between the two, but 11% approximately of the 2017 dense conifer was open conifer in 1913, and 8% of the 2017 dense was herbaceous in 1913, 6% was shrub. This has some really interesting implications for management, because that's the diversity of this landscape has changed pretty significantly. And indeed, this one image foreshadows much of what we're seeing across broad swaths of the eastern slopes of the Rockies, as work done by Julie Fortin, another LIM visual applications team member, and Eric published just recently showing that yes, this homogenization of the landscape is happening. So there could be some management implications in that. But management, well, it's all well and good to be in the photos, and I think you'll see from those previous images that yes, there's lots in those photos. But we really need to know on the ground extent. So we really need to know not a percent in a photo, but what are the hectares on the ground that each of those land classes cover. And so let's just zoom 65 kilometers due east from Assiniboine along the Elbow River above beautiful Elbow Falls, and we come to South Quirk. Some of you may know this as Myosotis Peak, and it's eastern slopes of the Rockies south of Calgary. That's the viewshed that we're going to be looking at. And here are the images, one taken by Arthur Wheeler in 1897 and another by MLP in 2014. So you can see that there has been, just looking at these images, you can see that there has been some change in land cover on this landscape. Here's the land cover classes that we've selected to use, and we got these cover classes in consultation with the Landscape in Motion dendrochronology team. But what about on the ground? Well, so we have Wheeler in 1897. What we've done here is, again, in the image analysis toolkit, we have taken that oblique image, the photo, and we have laid it out, and the land class on it, and we have laid it out in an ortho-rectified viewshed. And so we can see here 1897, and here 2014. And of course, one of the key things about having the land cover on these ortho-rectified viewsheds is that we don't have to stay just with percentages anymore. We can know some areas. And of course, these are approximate. But in 1897, it was about 1,200 hectares in this classified area of conifer, and about 2,000 in 2014. Now, let's just take a quick, and I'm going to be quite quick with this as we grow close to time. This is just a quick look at the end-to-end application of this tool in a sample area of the fire regime study area. And we should say we've done this in collaboration with LIM researcher Cameron Nafisi, and Cameron comes to us from the dendrochronology team at UBC, team hosted out of UBC. Anyway, let's zoom in. So we're going to go to Missing Link Mountain in the Sheep River Provincial Park in Kananaskis. And here, and this is one of the things that our collaboration with the dendrochronology team got us to focus really on the historic images. And we were lucky enough, and Cameron helped us select this particular set of stations. And we were lucky enough to have 1916 images and 1940 images taken from almost the same spot. You can see the approximate area that they cover here in these images. Here's the images themselves. So this 1916 Nichols, 1940 Parley, and not just one classification, but 3 cuts into the classification where density and height are applied to conifer, mixed wood, and broadleaf. And so these are the study areas. Here's our first sort of peek at this with the land cover classes. You can see a lot of change on this landscape in the intervening years, the intervening 40 plus years. And again, really well done into our study areas, into the dendrochronology study area here. We're going to take a deeper look at missing at the 1916 example, because here's the classification. Now here is the density, and this is density on conifer, mixed wood, and broadleaf. And here's density or height, again, conifer, mixed leaf, and broadleaf. We can do something kind of cool. We can subset out the conifer and then just pop the density on top. So here we see the density for conifer in this area. And this really helps us characterize the landscape we're looking at. It's mostly pretty dense, over 50%. And it's mostly pretty tall. And tall is greater than 4 meters. But how to get to that oblique image orthorectified? Well, we need a digital elevation model and a hillshade view, and we need to know some camera information. So we have camera location and elevation, and the direction that the camera's pointing, that's the azimuth, and the field of view of the camera. We take these 2 things, add them together, and we get this thing called the virtual photo. And that virtual photo is actually, every pixel on that virtual photo is directly tied back to the digital elevation model. So what do we do next? Well, we take and we align the historic image with the virtual photo. And we do that with finding corresponding photo pairs. So here we have point number 1 here in the historic. It matches point number 2 here in the virtual. And the same thing with the 3 and 4 and the other points. And then we apply a little bit of linear math. So this is a perspective transformation. And we now have a really nicely matched historic and virtual photo. So if we can do this to the historic photo, we can also do it to the vegetation classification mask. And that means that we can then go back to our digital elevation model and get our virtual photo with our classification mask draped over it. And since we know where every pixel in that virtual photo is with respect to the digital elevation model, we can now know what every class on every pixel in that virtual photo is. And that generates our orthorectified viewshed. And here's just a few quick looks at the orthorectified viewshed. You'll notice there's a lot of light blue in this particular image. That's areas that we haven't classified. And the reason we haven't is because we focused really on getting classifications that we could apply for this go round, the density and the height to. So here we see it with an overlay of a modern land cover, and this is Google Earth 2017, and just a slightly different view of it, kind of looking not quite bird's eye and not quite oblique, but sort of semi-oblique. So again, 2017 view, our 2017 land cover with the historic 1916 cover overlaid. And I should say that we have this for all 4 of these images. And we have all 4 of these images and all 3 of the 1940 images, and we've prepared a little takeaway for you of the view sheds for all 7 of these images, and they are all looking into this area here in Sheep River Provincial Park in Kananaskis, and they'll be available for you at the end of this. It'll be in the chat room. So I'll put a link there in the chat. And I'm just going to turn it over to Eric to quickly finish us off. Oh, Eric, you're muted.
You're so right. How embarrassing. Okay, just a minute. Although sometimes that's preferable, but nonetheless, I'll try to wrap up fairly quickly. I wanted to speak about a couple of different initiatives. We have several on the go, but one that's of particular interest to this region is work that we're doing with Bill Snow and the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, looking at whether we can discern patterns of indigenous land management, specifically around fire, in the historic images in our collections. So are there digital signatures, if you will, that we can pull out and recognize as potentially representing indigenous patterns? And we think there's pretty strong evidence that that's the case, and we're just starting to work through that right now. Next slide, please, Mary. And sort of exciting work and a lot to unpack, so I won't right now, but I just wanted to know that hot off the press, so to speak, is a graduate thesis in computer science that's used some of the new neural network, artificial intelligence software tools to do automated classification of our images. So on the left, on the top, you see the images themselves. Down below, the next row, the middle row, is what people who have worked with us have done manually to classify those. And on the bottom is what the artificial intelligence system was able to render. So Spencer Rose, the person who did this work, achieved spectacular, unexpectedly spectacular results. And so this is going to become a major push for us. If we can provide classifications relatively quickly and quite accurately across a whole landscape, we'll be able to ask quite different questions about how things have shifted. So anyway, we're pretty stoked about that. Next slide, please. So just a brief, maybe just to wrap up, talk about what's coming next in terms of our work. So we're working right now on a publication that sort of emerges out of some of the work we've done in Landscapes in Motion about how we do this kind of full suite of oblique image analysis, looking at further development of software. I mentioned the application of artificial intelligence for image analysis. For those of you in the research environment or management environment, you may be familiar with open source statistical analysis and spatial analysis tools like R and QGIS. So we're trying to integrate with those, which will increase the power and reach of some of the work that we're doing. And then we're hoping to do further work in the limb study area. So it's just a really exciting area to work in, and look forward to that. And I think that's it. So thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Here's some images to leave you with.
Yeah.